The adaptive or acquired immune system consists of antibodies and lymphocytes, called the humoral response and the mediated response. The adaptive immune system has to recognize the pathogen as a threat to be able to attack it. The adaptive response works by learning what is a foreign or harmful cell and then remembers these cells, so that next time it encounters it, it is able to identify the pathogen and fight it. The adaptive immune system is developed over time. When first born, there is no adaptive immune system because nothing has been encountered yet. Adaptive immune system can be developed naturally by encountering pathogens in the environment. It can also be developed through vaccines. A vaccine is a pathogen that is modified so that it is not harmful, but the adaptive immune system is still able to identify it and add it to the memory. The adaptive immune system can work around the whole body at multiple times using both the humoral response and the cell-mediated response. The humoral response works by sending antibodies to the antigen, which are made of white blood cells, which travel around the body in fluids such as blood and lymph, where they combat antigens by marking them as foreign cells. Antigens are molecules that are not normally found in the body. A key part of the humoral system is the B lymphocyte, also known as B cells. B cells are developed in the bone marrow and matures in the bone marrow to be able to tell what is an antigen and what is your own cells. B cells have thousands of membrane-bound antibodies on its surface. These antibodies can bind and mark an antigen and activate the B cell to reproduce itself to then fight the same type of antigen. Some of these cells that are produced on activation are memory cells, which are the cells that purpose is to remember the antigen that they want to attack. The other cells that are produced are the cells that fight against the antigen by mass-producing antibodies. Antibodies cannot kill antigens. They can only mark it. They mark it so that the phagocytes and lymphocytes are able to see that these cells are antigens. This is how the adaptive immune system is able to recognize the antigen and act as soon as it enters the host. Once an antigen has entered a cell of the host, antibodies are unable to reach that cell, meaning that the humoral response cannot work. This is where the cell-mediated response occurs. T lymphocytes, also known as T cells, fight the host cells that have been infected by antigens. All cells in the body have major histocompatibility complexes, also known as MHC. All cells have a class 1 MHC protein on their surface, indicating if the cell is healthy or not. If the cell is producing abnormal signals, it will be killed. Immune-related cells have a class 2 MHC, which bind to antigens and then mark them as dangerous. These MHC cells are a very important part in the cell-mediated response because T cells cannot identify whole antigens. Instead, they need other cells to have identified them. There are two main types of T cells, the helper and the cytotoxic cells. The helper cell does not kill any cells, but helps identify the cells that need to be killed, leaving the cytotoxic cells to kill the infected cells. T cells work the same way as B cells, by only being able to attack one specific antigen. The T cells will only kill the cells that have the correct class to MHC and specific antigen. If there is a correct match, then they will bond together at the MHC antigen part and becomes activated. Once activated, just like the B cells, the T cells will multiply into three different types: memory T cells, helper T cells, and regulatory T cells. The helper T cells release a chemical signal that notifies other cells that this cell is infected. These signals are called cytokines. When the cytokine enters another helper T cell, it activates it and produces more of these T cells. Cytokines also inform cytotoxic T cells that there is a cell that needs to be killed. The infected cells are spotted by the MHC sending irregular signals, as mentioned earlier. Cytotoxic T cells kill infected cells by binding into their cell and releasing granzymes into the cell, which leads to apoptosis. Apoptosis is where the cell membrane is destroyed, meaning the cell can no longer live. Helper T cells are a very important part of the adaptive immune system, as they are the ones who allow the cells to be killed. HIV is an antigen that aims to get inside the CD4 cell, which is a helper T cell. HIV gets inside this cell and converts its RNA into DNA, taking over the cell, and then starts to reproduce inside the cell. Once they have reproduced, they kill the CD4 cell and float around in the blood system to find more CD4 cells to get into and take over. The immune system tries to create more CD4 cells to combat the HIV, but this only helps it spread. CD4 cells are helper T cells, the cells that instruct the cytotoxic T cells to kill helper T cells. Because HIV can infect these cells, there is no cell that can tell the cytotoxic T cell to kill the helper T cells. HIV doesn't cause illness to the host. It is then the other antigens that get into the cells that do the damage, because there is no helper T cell to instruct the cytotoxic T cells to kill the infected cells. This is why HIV has become an epidemic. PrEP stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is a combination of two medicines that helps reduce the chance of contracting HIV and also slows the spread of HIV in the host. PrEP is used to protect non-infected humans from contracting the virus by pre-exposing them to the HIV to try and develop some memory cells to be able to fight it when seeing it. For some people, this will not work because there is very little amount of natural antibodies that can mark HIV. There is no vaccines or cure for HIV, so scientists have developed helping agencies to reduce the effect of HIV and slow down the spread. HIV, as stated earlier, needs to replicate inside a cell. Antiretrovirals, ARV, are cells that reduce the chance that HIV-infected cells will convert its RNA into the human DNA. It does this by introducing an enzyme that stops this conversion from happening, hence slowing down the spread. This is the only way that HIV can be treated due to it infecting such a crucial part of the adaptive immune system.